you know, back in the prior scenarios, basically, okay, what happens when, the treasury runs into liquidity problems? And the answer was shorten the duration. The next big kind of if else decision point will be what happens when the reverse repo facility gets very low or runs out, which is not right around the corner, but it can happen later this year. And Treasury Fed officials have already talked about that. They talked about the possibility of slowing down their QT eventually in response to the reverse repo facility getting fairly small. That's when you could see. I think the biggest comparison would be September 2019, which was the repo rate spike. That was a macro event that was not very noticeable to retail investors, but that was kind of a big event for macro-oriented investors, and it basically signaled the end of the prior quantitative tightening by the Fed, and they had to go back to some degree of quantitative easing to help with overall liquidity. So I think you could see a similar pivot like that um, whenever that gets low. But as it gets low, that becomes something to watch fairly closely. Overall, I think most economic indicators are now showing early signs of reacceleration. I would say largely it's fiscal driven, but there's still some troubling spots. So commercial real estate, unemployment's kind of in a mixed situation right now. Some of the global economies are still kind of stagnating. So I think we're in early signs of potential reacceleration. We have to watch to see if it's sustained, and then the next big thing to watch is what happens when the reverse repo facility gets fairly low. And you can kind of reduce the drama by not being in long duration treasuries, right? So, if you want to take on risk, there's plenty of other ways to take on risk. Um, and if you want to be in risk off, or at least have part of your portfolio in risk off, then, things like short duration treasuries or treasury inflation protected securities or other types of defensive assets can largely sidestep the question of what happens when the reverse repo facility gets low or runs out.
Yeah, that makes sense. So you think it could potentially have an impact, but I guess we'll have to wait and see what other tools they use.
Yeah, they can always pull out more tools, but I think in general, a fairly large moment would be when the Fed is no longer able to tighten their balance sheet anymore. They can still at that point, if they want to keep interest rates high, but then arguably high interest rates plus no more QT or outright QE would be stimulatory. And so we have to see how they decide to navigate that. We have to see what's happening with energy markets at that time because that's obviously a very important input into overall inflation. So that's kind of the next overall set of things to watch.